been a long time. No, it's just a week.
Yeah.
We were off for a week, but I did the
A lot
interview
has
with.
happened in that week.
I know. I did the interview with Jared Seidler from Baseball Prospectus in this spot last week. The first ever BSPN version of the Double G show. That was a lot of fun because he's dialed into a lot of the Giant stuff himself. So, we got to talk about some of the prospects and some of the Zadie stuff, but Brad and I will get a chance to talk about Kapler. We haven't had a chance to talk about that quite yet. We're also going to talk about some of the more the last time we recorded, we did like our Giantsy players, who went above and beyond. And this time we'll do most disappointing. We'll also look at the playoffs. And as I am watching, Philadelphia still have 3 innings left, but they're about to take a 2-0 lead on the Braves.
Now it's the bottom of the 6th as we're talking here. I don't think the Braves have a hit yet.
Dude, I haven't seen a box score, but they haven't scored in either of these 2 games yet. So
right, but I also
crazy offense that they had almost 300 home runs during the season.
That's insane. I mean, this is the weirdest series so far out of all of them that we've had. I mean, there are sweeps aplenty in the first round, the 2 out of 3, but this one is just so far completely mind-boggling.
And our guy, Zach Wheeler, he's only got 74 pitches through 5 2/3,
and confirmed no hits.
And so you get a little bit of wonder about when it comes to the 9th inning. You let him ride with it. You bring the bullpen. We're going to see it. Well, I kind of hope that he's got the no going into like the 8th and the 9th to see what decisions the manager will make.
Yeah, I think if it's a 4-0 ball game like this, you kind of let it ride. If it was 1-0 or 2-0, maybe things are a little bit different. But 4-0, But plus they could technically. I mean, he's not going to pitch again this series, because they'll be up 2-0 with 3 games left. He might pitch game 5. I mean, they've got all these weird days off now.
Yeah,
3 out of 5 series, so it's turning into basketball, like basketball days off. I feel like the basketball playoffs, they play a game and then like 1 a week. It just kind of feels like it goes on forever.
Yeah, I think they have like a window, and they just want to get everything stretched into that window. So if they have some short series, then the games kind of get spaced out. But if they have these long series, then the games are like all back to back. So they try and cram it all in. So it's just depending on how quick some of these series are done. Also, for those watching on video and they see my hat, I don't have a Diamondbacks hat. I can't buy any Diamondbacks gear.
No. God, no.
But this is the closest thing I have. University of Arizona ball cap. So we're all rooting for the Diamondbacks here. And how great was it to just see the Clayton Kershaw head down in his hands? I feel like it's the same thing. Like you could just take the same photo from the last several playoff runs, and it's just the same thing for him. Head in hand, sad. Couldn't even get out of the first inning. Like just sadness all around. I was so happy. Not that I don't have anything against Clayton Kershaw, though. He could have.
Well, he's a Dodger, so yeah.
He's a Dodger. he could have handled the equality night situation a little bit better than he did. And yeah, he just kills us almost every time that I feel like the Giants have played him. It's just he's on his best. So happy to see him fail here. It looks like Atlanta did get their first hit.
Oh, okay, there we go.
Oh, and their first run.
Wow.
So maybe they got 2 hits while we were chatting.
Look at that. Well, no, they got runners. Well, you must be way ahead of me because okay, there we go, 4-1. Oh, Acuna Jr. just went from third to home on that little gaff at second base. So they have a run. The fans are celebrating. They're going crazy. First run in 15 innings of this series. That's amazing.
Yeah, so
I would say poor Atlanta Braves, but I mean they'll be fine.
I know they're so good. Ooh, that's a risky play for him because
when you're down 4-0.
Yeah, you're down 4-0, and there's a base hit to right, so he's going first to third, and the second baseman lets the ball go past him, and he was not going to stop, and he made the right decision because he was going to be safe very easily. So
Yeah, I think when he saw Turner, I guess the ball popped up, and Turner, as soon as he saw that Turner didn't really know where the ball was, I think he decided, okay, I can get a run out of this.
that's what happens when you have speed, man.
Yeah,
That's how
exactly.
the Giants would
What's that
not have
like?
been able to do that.
No, and that's so frustrating, and that's one thing we're gonna definitely talk about today is the fact that our team needs to get faster. The Giants need to get faster. They need to get better defensively, um, and faster so that they could take advantage of defensive miscues like that. We just weren't able to do that at all this season.
Imagine
It's
Wilmer
hard.
turning the corner on third there, deciding whether or not to
Yeah,
go.
I would probably have left the room before he was thrown out by 3 feet at home
I
plate.
love it.
So
I love it. Wilmer.
we got to pick on Wilmer. We got to pick on Jock. We got to pick
Well,
on the no speed guys.
yeah, in a sense, you kind of do, but at the same time, if you're picking on Wilmer, you also gotta pat that dude on the back because
Oh, of
he
course.
was
Yeah,
excellent.
he was our offense.
But just like Jarrett and I were talking about, this is what you and I said in the offseason, is when you have so many guys who are better suited for DH, they end up playing the field way more than you want them because
Yeah,
of the way the Giants play situationally. And that's just what happened is we saw a lot more of Wilmer and Jock playing defense than anyone in their right mind needed to see.
yeah, absolutely.
It was nothing
Yeah.
but like plumber's crack. Like, you just know the plumber, he's gonna bend over. It's like you can't,
Yeah.
dude. It's just don't you know that's what it was like watching Jock play left field. It's just like a big giant plumber's crack out in left field.
But you know what, and that's fine, and we can do that. And again, we had to do that a couple of years ago. But when you're leading the National League in home runs, you could do that. When you're
Mm-hmm.
not leading the National League in home runs and you're near the bottom, it really, really emphasizes the problem areas of your team, and that's just kind of what happened with all of that. When you're not hitting and you're not hitting home runs, everything else is going to be glaring. You can blame it on everything else at that point. You could try to say, well, the defense is so bad. No, you're not hitting. That's the
Yeah.
problem.
Yeah.
You can band-aid stuff with home runs and runs scored, but otherwise, no.
Yeah, and we'll also at the end of this, we'll look at some predictions from the beginning of the season, from before the season started, and we'll see how we did. I think we did this at the All-Star break too. We did kind of a catch up to see
We
where
did a
we
couple.
were.
Yeah, we had,
So
I think, 2 or 3 at the All-Star break. No, 2. So this is the rest of them. Tallied all of them. We had 6 predictions. Spoiler alert, it did not go well for me. And it went okay for you. So we'll just leave it at that.
All right, let's talk about Kapler. I think we both were under the impression before he got let go that he was going to get one more shot, that he and Zaidi was going to get one more shot. And it turns out that he didn't. And Farhan said that this was his call, and he went to management and ownership and was like, hey, this is what I think we need to do. And at the same time, he sounded like he lost his best friend. They were really close. That part of it didn't really make a ton of sense to me because it was like, yeah, we need to make some adjustments, but it was all about Farhan saying, I need to learn how to collaborate better. I need to make decisions with, not be so stringent on, that's what I'm taking it as. I can't be so textbook to how I deal. We need to be a little bit more collaborative. And he was like taking the blame for a lot of it. And then it turns out that Kapler was the one that was fired. So obviously,
Yeah.
Zaidi is not going to fire himself, but it did seem like they were in lockstep. So in this situation, the manager goes, and I do wonder if Farhan is going to be able to make those adjustments like he said, which is, we got to do things a little bit more collaboratively, outside thoughts and opinions and less kind of, listening, agreeing with ourselves kind of stuff. I wonder if you can actually make that change.
I don't know. That's a tough one. I the change that needs to be made, and it's going to be talked about all off season is and if it's going to happen, and that's also going to be, who the next manager is this going to happen? But the change that really needs to be made is, are we going to be looking at platoons? Are we going to be looking at 15-man pitching staffs? Are we going to be looking at openers? Are we going to look at a traditional bullpen? Those are all the things that I'd like to see changed. I'd like to see us go back to a little bit more traditional baseball. Is Zadie capable of that? Is he capable to let go of the reins and say, hey, new manager, I'm going to give you these players. These are what they're good at. This is the philosophy of baseball operations in San Francisco. But if you want to change it, change it. I mean, he's alluded to that in some of the interviews and pretty much said, like you had said too, it's going to be a little bit more some pushback from the manager. He'd like to have some, not pushback, but more different ideas from the manager. I don't know if that's if we're going to go that route, especially if they're talking about there's a possibility of we might see a manager who's never managed in the bigs before. Grant Brisbee threw out the article, and Bags also hit on it that it's a possibility. We may see somebody like Stephen Vogt, who's a previous catcher with the Giants and the A's.
Bags also threw out Pat Burrell on the Tim Kawakami podcast.
Yeah,
that was kind of interesting.
I read his article yesterday, and I thought, as I got back from vacation, I had a lot to catch up on. And as I was reading, I go, Pat Burrell.
What are we at? Like chugging beers after games? Like what's going on?
I don't. I'm not. I mean, I'm not a huge fan of that. But again, it's hard to say, because if you get a guy who hasn't managed before and all of a sudden he's a manager, he might do a decent job. I'd like to see a guy like Ron Washington. I mean, that's kind of that's my number one guy that I want to see is Ron Washington. We know his track record with players. There's not one player in the major leagues who has anything bad to say about Ron Washington.
Yeah.
He did a good job in Texas with the Rangers, brought him to the World Series and we beat him there. But he has a track record as a good manager and a good baseball guy. He's been around the game for years and years and years. He's in Atlanta right now as a bench coach, third base coach, I think also. So he's been around in a winning organization for the last few years too. And that's also a good guy to pull from.
We had a funny comment from Paul who was watching live. He said, not saying that they are slow, but they would come in fourth place after a snail, a turtle, and a wheelchair. When our reference to the Giants, there's their lack of speed here. When I talked to Jarrett,
he's not wrong. I'll tell you.
When I talked to Jarrett, his question was, if it's not Kapler, all of the top guys who are on everybody's lists are also heavy analytics guys.
Right.
And so he said, and also possibly player development guys, which is, what he thought may have been part of the issue with Kapler, in that Kapler is going to be very opinionated on the development of guys. And maybe that could have been a small situation where he may have liked folks more so than.
And that's where Kapler was from,
right?
Player development with the Dodgers. So and I don't want to see a situation like that, because then we're just trading Kapler for Kapler.
Exactly. But the flip side is maybe Kapler on the field was solid, but it was Kapler's interpersonal skills in the locker room skills. We kept reading he just basically let the locker room, the players police themselves. He wasn't big on rules or anything. And then you see the comment by Logan Webb about, when I came up, it was Buster Posey and Brandon Crawford. So you kind of double checked your ego at the door and you kind of rode the wave of those guys. So yeah, that is interesting. And Kapler is an ex-ball player, ex-top prospect. So he understands that game very well. But at the same time, you just wonder if he's kind of a self-starter. He's not a guy that needs a pat on the back or a guy that needs the rah-rah stuff. And if that's his personality, then maybe your next coach is kind of similar to him, but maybe a little bit better about putting the arm around the shoulder of somebody who's struggling, or, you know, kind of lighten a fire underneath their rear end when need be, which it doesn't seem like Kapler was. It seems like Kapler was much more just strong personality, but like maybe not the greatest with the relationships. Now, obviously we don't know for sure. I'm just all
Right.
the things that I'm reading. That's kind of how it reads. So, well, I'm still waiting for the big piece that's going to come out about why this thing had to end the way that it did. There's been some good reporting so far, but there's got to be more stuff coming from the Giants side.
Oh, I'm
But
sure.
and
I'm
it'll
sure.
eventually come out. But that will be interesting. But I guess again, I go back to what Jarrett and I were talking about. Who do you bring in? Because whoever they bring in is going to probably be a lot like the other candidate that Farhan really wanted, which was Kapler. So that is something to look at. We were talking about Bob Melvin, and San Diego said, Melvin's coming back, GM is coming back, so he's off the table. There's other candidates out there like Will Venable, who has some small ties to the Giants just because his pops played for the Giants in the early to mid '80s. But it's just the way that baseball is today. I don't think there's no Bruce Bochy's out there, because you can't
Right.
be a Bruce Bochy. If you're a Bruce Bochy, say like a Girardi or a Joe Madden, like those guys are gone. Like they don't fit because the baseball operations piece wants the manager to fit in the system, not be like this outlier in the system. So Bochy's, I mean, can't argue with what Bochy's doing in Texas. I just kind of just like, could we just bring him back? Like, like, can we just
Yeah.
let's just pull him back and just let him go until he's done, until he's like, all right, guys, I'm done. My wine,
Yeah.
I have too much wine now. I can't. My
Well, and
office
the
is
and the
flooded.
and the problem with Bochy and the way it ended, though, was that he was burned out. I mean, managing through 3 World Series and going that deep into the playoffs all 3 times, and then in 2016 getting in the playoffs, and getting past the Mets, and then playing the Cubs for 5 games, 4 games, I think it was. A situation like that, and then you get into 2019, and he's kind of like, new regime comes in. I think I've run my course. I think I'm tired. I think I'm done. He needed the 3 years off. So that was, just kind of the way that all played out. I don't think there was any situation where he was going to hang on, um, and stick around and be in place as the Giants manager this year. Keep going and going and going. He needed to recharge. The Giants saw that. He saw that. He even stayed on as special advisor to the Giants for 3 years before he ended up in Texas. And again, I'll throw the name out there again. Ron Washington was the runner up, to Bruce Bochy, one of the runners up to Bruce Bochy for the job in Texas this time around again. So he's still a guy who's being considered, and I think he kind of bridges that gap between old and new, because he's been around the new analytics and the way baseball is played now, and he's been around the way baseball was played back in the day. So you say there aren't any guys left, and I say there's one guy left, and I'd like to see Ron Washington get that chance, because I still haven't read an article about Ron Washington that says this guy needs to be out of the game or he's awful. Everything I've read, over the years has always been the players love him. The guy is brilliant. He's a brilliant baseball mind, and I'd love to see him have another shot.
Could the Giants go internal?
They could. I mean, they're talking about a couple people internal, and of course, they're throwing out the name Pat Burrell. And so, I mean, they could go internal. I think the fans would not go for that, because I think right now they just
Too similar.
kind of want, too similar. I think they just kind of want a total change. They don't want somebody who has coached or been around under Kapler. I think they want fans want all ties cut from Kapler.
But you got to imagine some of that coaching staff, if not a lot of that coaching staff's probably coming back, right?
I would hope Kai Correa would even get a chance, get a look. But again, are we looking at Kai Correa and say that's a carbon copy? Or are we saying, like you had mentioned, are we saying this is Kapler, but elevated on the player side of things, elevated on the clubhouse side of things? Farhan has mentioned too, he wants a recruiter. He wants a manager who's a recruiter, somebody that can come to these.
Which isn't a great thing to say about Kapler, because you're basically saying Kapler was not a good recruit.
Yeah, and there was I can't remember who it was, but there was a free agent that said that they left one of the meetings and they just said it was a lot of awkward interactions in the meeting when they were trying to be recruited. So was it robotic? Was it Farhan pitched baseball operations and then turned it over to Kapler, and Kapler was basically like, yeah, all of that, come to us. So you want a rah guy. You want a guy like and a guy who was looked at by the Giants a couple of years ago, and that's David Bell, over in Cincinnati, who's now leading a bunch of young guys in Cincinnati and fighting for a playoff spot this year, as they did, and then they have bright hopes for next season. But he's a rah guy. I mean, too rah to the point where I think he probably led the majors in getting tossed as a manager this year. But I really do think we need to look outside of the organization. I think they're going to do lip service and some, satisfy the internals by doing some internal recruiting and looking around. But I think they really need to go outside and bring in somebody fresh.
Well, update on the Braves and the Phillies. The Braves, another hit in the bottom of the 7th. Wheeler is still in 4-1 Philadelphia. Are you rooting for Texas at this point?
Sure. If Bochy got another ring, that'd be great. Because what that means is it wouldn't be the Dodgers.
Yeah.
So obviously, when it gets to the playoffs, for me, I don't even care if the Yankees win the World Series. That doesn't bother me.
The Dodgers.
Anybody but the Dodgers. I really don't care. Like this Philly Braves series. If Philly wins this game and they go up 2-0 and then the Braves rush back and win the next 3 games and win 3-2, that's great. I think that's great for the game of baseball.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'm rooting for Texas, but I'm also, if the Orioles make a comeback and beat up the Rangers the next couple of games and then win that series, and great. That's a good story too, because the Orioles are a very young team. The world is going to get to see more of Adley Rutschman. So many great players, Santander, so many great players on that Baltimore team. So if they go on, that's awesome. But yeah, I personally don't have a rooting interest in anybody except for right now, heavily the Diamondbacks. That's this week.
There's lots of small kind of relatedness to Giants in this playoffs, because you have Bochy.
Yeah.
You got Dusty Baker.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, they could be going head to head in the ALCS. That would be kind of cool.
Yeah.
You have Carlos Correa, who's all of a sudden playing like the $300 million player that he wanted to be.
Yeah.
And so that is there as well. And then obviously in the National League, I think everyone's just rooting for the Diamondbacks at this point, at least if you're a Giants fan. And it's so fun.
Oh no, what happened?
Somebody just hit a 2-run bomb and now it's 4-3.
Nice.
There you go. The Braves are good, man. This is a good series, I think, for the sport, because the Braves have been the best team in the National League. Philly got hot last year, and they know based on last year that they could get back, and so it's just really competitive series, and I think it's like one of the best divisional series matchups that you'll ever see.
Oh yeah, and it's strange too. I mean, they're talking about what can we do next year to fix this, but you've got the Phillies and the Braves facing each other in this round, and then you've got the Giants, you've got the Diamondbacks and the Dodgers facing each other in this round as well.
It's all cool.
Fine with me too. I think there used to be a rule back in the day, and I want to say it was in football, and I can't remember. And this is when they had less wild card teams too. When if you were a division team, two divisions teams could not face each other unless it was the NFC Championship game or the AFC Championship game. I think that was years ago. I want to say it was the 80s, and then they changed it because they thought, we got to stick with the seedings. But it was there for a little while. It was strange, but happened.
Yep. All right. Let's talk about let's talk about the list of disappointing players, because as every season begins, you're optimistic about what could happen. That's the greatest thing about opening day, is everybody can be optimistic about their team. The Giants had a strategy of signing players to opt-outs, meaning somebody like Conforto or Ross Stripling, if they had a good year, they would opt out and be a free agent again. And if they didn't have a good year, the Giants would get them for a second year. And then they also went after guys who we wanted them to go after. Haniger, we were both in on the Haniger signing because we're just like, man, this team needs right-handed pop. And then the curse of the injury, which has been, sort of the last part of his career, came up and reared its ugly head. And so a lot of that strategy that they used, Sean Manaea similarly, though Manaea did pitch well in the second half of the season, none of this stuff really went right for them. And, you kind of like none of it's not always going to go well, right? You're hoping that some of them hit, knowing that not all of them are going to hit. And when you look at Conforto, when you look at Manaea, when you look at Stripling, you wanted one of those three guys to have like a borderline all-star season, and it would have sort of made up for the fact that, just this strategy is not very team friendly. It's not very fan friendly. And when none of them really hit, it just makes this whole process seem like a waste, even though we know that there will be moments when it will work and there will be moments when it doesn't work. And that's when I was looking at my list, like that thing, it just made me feel sick to my stomach, because we said this at the beginning of the season. No one is going to buy their child a Michael Conforto Giants jersey because
Right.
he's not going to be here if he has a good season. And so it's so not fan friendly. And now I'm kind of like ill thinking about the idea of bringing these guys in. And then I asked Jarrett about this on the show that we did last week. Like, how do you run a clubhouse? How do you get players to be like, rah, rah, I'm in, I'm a Giant, when everybody's essentially a free agent? It's got to be really hard. And that's the part of the clubhouse piece. If you're Kapler, if you're on Team Kapler, you're like, yeah, I had one guy I knew was going to be here for sure next year, and that's Logan Webb,
Yeah.
because even prospects, Giants may trade some of these prospects. So my list is going to be 2 out of the 3 players that I chose were all on this 1-year opt-out deal. The third one is another free agent signing, but that is kind of my when I looked at this, I went, wow, I just did not like their free agent signings ultimately, because all 3 of them ended up on my disappointing list. So I'll start with one, because I know you have 2. So I'll go with one, and then you go with one.
Sounds good.
I'm starting with Conforto. We knew it was a risk because he had missed the entire previous season because of injury. And the Giants were kind of like the cushion team. They were the parachute team for him. And he didn't even really have struggles with the shoulder. It was just, some of these older guy injuries, legs and here and there, and he wasn't consistent enough. He didn't hit for power. Maybe Oracle Park's not the greatest place to hit for power, but that's the one I'm going to circle, because I think if the Giants were going to be a really good baseball team, they needed a bopper, and on paper, he probably had the best opportunity to be that bopper for them, or just be an excellent hitter. Like, he has all the makings of like a really good major league hitter, and he just didn't have that season for them. And I think without him playing well, that probably more so than maybe anybody else in the lineup meant that we were going to be a 500 or less team.
Yeah. And when you said, let's do this, let's do our disappointments for the season, that could easily be top of the list. And then I start looking at the list and I go, my God, that could be everybody on this team.
Yeah, it could be. It really could be.
I mean, there's probably like 20 players. Some of them are rookies too. Some of them were the young guys, but it wasn't their fault. They were kind of rushed into these situations because of injuries.
Yeah.
But looking at the list, and speaking of injuries, mine are kind of going to be injury related, but that's just the name of the game, and that's how it goes. It's disappointing when you have injuries. It's disappointing, way more disappointing for the player to have the injuries than for us fans to say, this guy could be out there. But my number one disappointment, and mainly because of his performance before the injury, and then the fact that he missed the entire rest of the season because of it. And that's Anthony DeSclafani. He's my number one. And I know he wants to be out there, and I know he wants to be fighting. He's a Sinatra guy, so I'm not knocking him. But the fact that he came out and was giving up tons of home runs, his ERA was up again this season, had such a fantastic first season for us. And then 2 years later, here we are thinking, how can we cut ties? But, the flexor strain in the arm, causing him to only get 18 starts this season, which when I looked
actually surprised he had that many.
I was too. When I looked at the numbers, I go, wow, he actually had more than a half of a season worth of starts almost.
Yeah.
But to get as far as he did and then just get blown up and then have the flexor strain issue. And that was a disappointment because then it caused kind of a domino effect in the rest of the starting pitching staff. Then you had you kind of forced Stripling and Manaea to get in there and take a spot. And then one of my other disappointments was Stripling because of that. Manaea really kind of turned around the second half of the season. I thought that was great. But to force Stripling in there, and then Stripling was basically worse than DeSclafani on DeSclafani's good days.
Yeah.
And so that made it really tough. So that was kind of my disappointment there. My first disappointment was Disco. Looking forward to seeing what he could do next season. I think next year is the last year of his 3-year deal. And so looking forward to see if he could turn things around. Latest report is that he's going to have a full off season, regular amount of work in the off season, and then come into spring training being rested and ready to go. So we will see if he can turn that around.
Yeah, your 1B in there was my number 2, which was Ross Stripling. And I think a lot of my frustration with him, I can deal with someone just battling, having frustration after frustration after frustration. I guess this is somewhat based on his ability to be jovial in the press. Like, he's not a John Brebbia,
Mm-hmm.
You kind of want to root for John Brebbia just because he's kind of goofy and funny and he's got that dry sense of humor. But what it ultimately tells you is he understands his role. He understands what he's good at, and he understands what his deficiency is. And I kind of wanted to see that with Stripling because he had a bad year, just giving up home runs like crazy. His style to come all the way over the top, very dependent on, being able to pitch through and to be consistent with his stuff, his fundamentals. And he just could not, he almost like back-to-back starts were like completely different, like every time. And so then when you look at it and you go, okay, well, how is he going to respond to being coached and to being, all of a sudden he's a long guy. We saw the same thing with Alex Wood, right? Alex Wood was just so frustrated with his role. I'm sure some of it was frustration with his, him getting older as well, but he did not endear himself to Giants fans through the media. And Stripling wasn't as bad as Wood, but there were moments where I was like, I'm not sure he knows that he is coming off poorly, because the expectation was that he was going to help. And so when you're not helping to the fan base, you kind of have to come, a little apologetic, I guess you would say.
Yeah.
And he was just like, excuse and complain, a little bit of complaining here and there. And again, this is really more about his performance, but I do think that had he and Alex Wood been a little bit better in the media, I think they wouldn't have come off as slightly antagonistic. But really, for Stripling, it's just in the details, in the stats. He was just poor. He was a reclamation project, and because of the Giants' ability to fix guys, I think we all expected, oh, this is easy. Ross Stripling's going to be good because this is what we do. Carlos Rodon, nope, we're coming in. He's coming in, fixing him, giving him the best year of his career, and then he's going to go leave and make a ton of money. It did not happen for Ross. For whatever reason, they could not fix him. And I just, like, when I thought about him, it was just negative feelings. It's like, oh, God, I don't think they have he's pitch up. This is not good. I didn't have any confidence that they were going to win against a good team when he was on the mound.
No, definitely not. And he's kind of a strange one too, because he's got the opt out. A lot of people say, "Oh, he's definitely opting back in and he's going to stay." He's not happy. I don't think he's happy as a San Francisco Giant. I think there's a chance he opts out. Yeah, he can stay here and make more money, but he can also leave and make less and be in a happier situation. One for him where he's an every fifth day starter somewhere. I think it's really going to matter. And this is why Farhan says he wants to have a manager in before spring training starts, because that's when the opt-outs are going to happen. I think it's a couple days after the World Series ends, like 3 or 4 days after the World Series ends. Free agency or opt-ins and opt-outs all kind of happen, and the free agency starts like 7 days later.
Yeah.
So that's going to be a strange one. I would not be shocked if Stripling does opt out, just because I think he wants to be happier somewhere else. Manaea probably opts in. There's a chance Manaea could leave because of the second half that he put together. But I think he likes, from what I could tell, he liked being a San Francisco Giant. I mean, there's a chance he's fighting for one of the 5 rotation spots next season if we go with a traditional rotation, 5 or 6 pitchers. So yeah, Stripling's a strange one. Big disappointment, but not to the point where I think he opts back in and gets the 22 million, or no, sorry, 12. I think the way his contract broke down was like less in the first season, much more in the second season. So that could kind of play a part in it.
If you gave Zaidi some truth serum, what do you think he hopes happens with Stripling and Manaea?
I think he hopes that they both opt out. I think he would like to have a kind of a do-over at this point and say, look, there's probably 2 other pitchers out there that are similar in numbers who we can get for half the price. Maybe 2 pitchers you can get for the price of 1 Manaea or 1 Stripling. So I think that's what Zaidi would say. Like, I hope they both opt out so we can kind of move on from this.
Because if he wants them to opt in, the argument or the sell job is like, yeah, we know your coach was a little awkward. Your manager, communication-wise, maybe not the easiest guy to chat with, but we're going to fix that.
Exactly.
And so that if he wants them in, maybe that's the selling point, is we're going to have a little bit better communication across the board.
Yeah, and that's possible. And then maybe Stripling's a better performer because he knows his role right off the bat. There's no switching up in the middle of it. He's Zaidi probably is going to tell him, hey, you know what? Everybody's being investigated, so don't mention the phantom IL, man. Don't do that
Exactly. Exactly. Well, yeah, what's going to happen with the Mets there?
I don't know, man. That's pretty interesting. I didn't get to listen to your interview with Jarrett, but I don't know if that had even come out yet when you guys did the interview, but I don't think it did. I think that was later on in the week.
So I remember, now this is like a really weird analogy here. But I'm gonna pull it back in glorious form. So I went to Comic-Con in, it was like either the late 2000s or the early 2010s, and Kevin Smith was there of Clerks fame.
Yeah,
And he had just done a podcast where he said that he had gone on a flight, Southwest flight, and they actually kicked him off the flight because he was too big.
Yes.
And so he had this whole sort of a stand-up, it's mostly just storytelling, and he called it Too Fat to Fly.
I remember that. Yeah.
And he said when he got kicked off of that plane and they finally got him out and they walked him off, he locked eyes with another gentleman who was probably bigger than him. And he said the look on that gentleman's face was like, please do not point me out. Please, please, please. Right. And that's sort of what I feel.
Man.
What I feel here with the Giants is they're like, whatever happens with the Mets, please don't tell on us.
Yes.
Like, don't point it out. Just take this one for the team. You know, I got dinner next time you come to town, like that kind of thing.
And I think Major League Baseball organizations will do that. I think they'll kind of keep it in house and say, look, yeah, you can investigate us all you want to, but here's, here's our doctor's records. Here's all of our stuff and blah, 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 blah.
Well, you know, the NBA is going to have this problem too.
Oh, yeah.
So the NBA, just the people who listen to the Death Lineup probably understand this because Brian and I have talked about it, but there's a new rule in the NBA where they are trying to make sure that for national televised games, players have to actually be hurt to sit out, or if they need to, because there's this whole thing about load management where these players, the information shows that if all these guys play all these games, by the time the playoffs come, they lose steam and they get hurt and X, Y, and Z. So they're trying to create opportunities for rest during the season so that the players stay fresh. And so the NBA is like, you cannot rest X number of people on a national televised game. If Steph Curry and Draymond are playing a national televised game, like both of them, they can't miss unless they're like really hurt. And so you're going to have these teams who are going to they're going to be questioned about, this guy missed this game. What, but their argument is these guys are always hurt. Like they're always dinged up. So you could, there's a reason to put a guy on the injured list. These guys are going to tough it out for the most part because this is their job. But so that's an interesting way. How do you define what they were doing? Because, Ross Stripling may say, oh yeah, phantom injury report. And I'm like, dude, your back was jacked up all season. You're saying phantom injury report, and yet you missed all of these starts. Like, what are you talking about? Right.
Yeah.
So it'll be interesting the way that they handle that.
Well, the other thing too, with like the NBA and baseball is a little bit different because there are so many games. So, you can kind of fudge this around a little bit, but with the NBA, tickets are so expensive. And when you want to take your family to a game, and you buy your tickets in advance, and you pay so much money for it, and then you go to the game and the stars are being rested on both teams, that's going to be a problem. And I know it's always a problem because, like, anytime you went to a Giants game and you showed up and you're like, Barry Bonds isn't in the lineup tonight. Not because he's hurt, because it was a rest day. But again, back in those days, we didn't really have very
if they would have had the DH, then he wouldn't have had to take any rest.
Yeah, exactly. But you'd go to this game. But again, I'd go to Candlestick Park to see him, and you paid $5 to get in, and you go, oh well, still watching a baseball game and eating a Polish dog. So what do I care?
And it's still cold, even though it's a 1 p.m.
Yeah,
in the
doesn't matter. Yeah, still leaving at 11:30 tonight when the game's over, and it's still going to be freezing. So yeah.
All right, let's talk about our drink. I have what I like to call my cocktail Yeti. My wife calls it her favorite coffee mug, but I'm like, no, I bought this specifically for alcohol. Like this is to keep my drinks cold.
Don't put coffee in it because it's gonna trap the coffee flavor in the side. I know everybody. That's the one thing. So I have one of those. Use it for coffee only, and I don't want tea in it because if I put tea in it and it's a floral tea, a chamomile, it's gonna stick to the sides, and my coffee's always gonna smell and taste like tea for the rest of its life. So I totally understand.
So I have I have some bourbon. Now, I actually have to go on an all-day fast tomorrow for a doctor's
Ooh,
appointment. So this is the last day I could have anything fun. So I'm having a
yes.
drink and I'm gonna probably eat a few more carbs for dinner than I normally would because tomorrow it's nothing but black coffee and bone broth and tea like all day long. And then
Well, and for
also
like, this is the one thing they don't tell you that sometimes you find out later. They don't really want you to eat too for like 2 or 3 days. They don't want you to eat things that are too fibery.
mm,
And I didn't realize that until like halfway leading up to my last cleanse. Um, and I got to the day before and I read it in real fine print and I go, but I eat a ton of fiber.
yeah.
So I was like, is this going to be a problem? And they said, well, we hope not. See how it goes. I'm like, oh, okay. Well, I mean, once you get started, you can't really stop. So yeah.
So yeah, I think the only thing that I screwed up on in this because they give you like a week long prep thing. I
Mhm.
actually had some ibuprofen because my knees were hurting, and I didn't realize
Oh
you're not
yeah.
supposed to have ibuprofen. So, anyways, but yeah, so I grabbed some Basil Hayden
That's good stuff.
bourbon at the grocery store. I'm always looking for something interesting when it comes to bourbon because you're a little into this. You're a little far into bourbons and whiskeys when you have 3 different bourbons for 3 different things. It's like, "Oh, this is the
Yes.
mixing bourbon. Oh, and this is the other mixing bourbon for this kind of thing. And this is the bourbon that I'll drink on ice, and this is the bourbon that I'll drink straight." So, this is my bourbon that I will not mix, and I will just have it with an ice cube. So, Basil Hayden, and, it is, it's very nice, and the Trader Joe's bourbon that you told me about for the mixing bourbon. That's about $11 or $13 or whatever a bottle. They also have another one that's a sour mash one that's a little bit maybe, similar price or a little bit more. But then when you get into and I wonder if this is also in the psychology of when you purchase alcohol, which is if it's a higher price, you almost go like, "Oh, I can't waste it." So
Yes.
in my mind, I cannot mix this with this because this is a little bit more expensive. And you don't want to waste it. You kind of want to savor it. And you want it to last longer. Now, I don't know if any of that matters realistically, but just in your mind, it's like a psychological thing. So I just want to hang on to this, and I'll mix the other stuff with a Diet Coke or whatever, and I'll be fine. But this one, man, this one only is for on special Thompson to Clark occasions.
Yeah, I've got a couple of bottles that are like that. And speaking of that, I kind of, I got home from vacation and I started thinking, life's short and I've got, it's fall and it's getting a little bit cooler. So I'm heading into kind of scotch season. So I had a scotch last night and then I poured another one tonight because I was like, you know what, I'm gonna have these because they're just
Ooh.
sitting in the shelf there. So it's a Glenlivet 12. It's a
El
illicit still.
that is that what a
It is
name. Holy crap.
the illicit. My camera's unfocusing on it, but anyways, illicit still. Got it from Costco, believe it or not, and of course it's not there anymore. And it was a pretty decent price. I think it was like $40, $45,
Mhm.
but it sure as heck drinks like an $80 bottle. And I
Yeah.
think if I look it up, that's around how much it is. But yeah, it was like it could have even been like $33 at Costco. Um, and then now that I think about it, I should have gotten 2 bottles
Yeah.
because it is very good. But it's a little bit smoky,
Mm.
but it is a smooth sipper. It goes very, very well with Frank Sinatra. It goes very, very well with Bill Evans and John Coltrane.
There you go.
And it is definitely that time of season. I don't know if you can see the wind blowing out here, but we had a little bit of rain today. I heard some thunder. A lot of different things are happening. I think it's like 70. What is it? 73 today, and in a couple days it'll be 59. So that's kind of up here in the
That's
Sierras.
crazy
It,
because
it just goes back and forth. Yeah.
it's like all of last week it was in the 80s, and then this week it's gonna be in the 70s, but then we get to the weekend, it's gonna be like 90. Like, what the
Yeah, well, and when we got to Anaheim on Saturday, it was weather was decent, and then Sunday we went into Disneyland. It rained for about 30 minutes straight, and it was probably 71 degrees, 70 degrees. And then 3 days later, it was 93 degrees. So we're walking around the park just drenched in sweat when we were drenched in rain a couple days prior.
Yeah.
So Anaheim gets hit with the kind of the weird temps changes as well. We drove through on the way there. We drove through the Angeles National Forest because we kind of got detoured a little bit. Made one of the kids puke because that's just what they do on those windy roads. And we were driving through fog and rain the whole way through that Angeles National Forest detour. And it was the coolest thing. All of a sudden you drop down and you go, oh, it's sunny. We're in LA. So yeah, it's a kind of a bizarre area up there.
All right. We may get to the end of this baseball game. We got one more segment right now. Phillies 4, Braves 3. 2 outs, bottom of the 8th, runner on second for the Braves, and they're trying to Austin Riley up at the plate. They're trying to come back here, and we'll see if we get through the end. But now it is time for our preseason predictions that we did that Brad kept cataloged for the season, and he has now tallied up all of the information to see how poorly we did on these predictions.
Yeah, we didn't do well. And as I was going through their predictions, I go, wow, we were really, really on the optimistic side of things.
We always are, though.
Yeah, and if all of these things would have happened, I think we would have been a playoff team and had a nice deep run in the playoffs. But none of this happened. A couple of these things happened, but we'll go over them. We had 6 predictions. The first one was Casey Schmidt going to be up by May 1st? And we went over this at the All-Star break.
Yes.
But I said, yes, he would. I said, yes, he would.
You said yes, I
no.
said no, and he was.
You said no. And he was up 8 days later, or 7 days later on May 8th. So I was wrong and you were right on
barely. That. You were much closer though. It was like
you were thinking July-ish maybe.
Yeah.
And that was the big guy. We weren't thinking Bailey. We weren't thinking Matos. We weren't thinking Luciano. None of those guys were in our mind or on our radar or on anybody's radar really at the beginning of the season. But injuries and the way the season went, it just kind of all happened. So,
by the way, Riley just hit a 2-run homer. Braves were up 5-4.
Are you kidding me? Unbelievable.
It was a moon scraper too.
This is gonna be a series, man. This is gonna be fun.
Amazing.
All right, and then going back to Philly for 2.
Yeah.
Now you can split there, and you don't have to worry about having to sweep in Philly in that environment. You just got to win one ball game. So, Braves were saving up all their runs.
Crazy stuff.
Score in
man.
Game 1.
October baseball.
Gotta love it, man. And then we got Diamondbacks and Dodgers starting here pretty soon.
Yes, like in 5 minutes.
And the awful Raiders Packers game that I don't think anybody's going to care.
I forgot about that one.
Yeah, everybody did. So second one was All-Star break. Were we going to be in second or first place? I said no. You said yes. I was right on that one at the All-Star break. We were in third place, only 2.5 games out of first place. Diamondbacks and Dodgers were tied for first, and now here they are in the NLDS battling each other.
Yeah.
So that one lasted.
It shows how good your question was, though, because it was almost like an over-under, like as far as where they actually were at the All-Star break.
You'll see actually how close I was on one other one, not the other. The other one's ridiculous. Wait till we get to the next one. You're gonna love this one. So I was right on that one. You were wrong. I think you predicted we were going to be in second place. Over under 30.5 steals for the great Bryce Johnson.
Yeah.
Not even close. He ended up with 3 stolen bases on the year. We thought the year of the
stolen base
rule changes, the year of the stolen base, it happened for every other team except for ours. We decided to just do the exact opposite.
Well, you know what happened? You got psyched out because the dude stole like 10 bases in the spring training.
He was the spring training stolen base leader. So I go, well, you know what? He's going to come up. He's going to be a 4th outfielder at some point. Again, we weren't thinking about Luis Matos. We weren't thinking about Speckler. We weren't thinking about anybody else at that point other than possibly seeing Casey Schmidt.
Tyler Fitzgerald.
Tyler Fitzgerald, who's being called the best defensive center fielder in the Giants organization. So
And he's a shortstop.
And he's a shortstop. So I think in free agency we might target a center fielder. If that tells you anything.
That's what we thought last year.
That's the same thing we were thinking every year since like Darren Lewis. 3 stolen bases for Bryce Johnson. I said over. Boy, was I wrong. You said under. I think you probably weren't thinking 3 stolen bases, but either way, you were right.
Yeah.
Starting pitchers used. This one is very close. Over under on this one, I put it at 12.5. We both said under. We were both wrong. How many starting pitchers did we use this season, Garrett? What do you think? Over under was 12.5.
14.
We used 13 starting pitchers this year. And I have them for you. Let's just throw them out there because it's fun to kind of hit these names and kind of see who they were. Logan Webb led the team, of course, with 33 starts. Alex Cobb was in there at second. And then there's the one we were both surprised by, Anthony Desclafani, third in the team with starts. Who do you think was fourth?
Brebbia.
Ryan Walker.
Oh, Walker. Yeah, because Brebbia was hurt for a lot of the year.
That's right. The rookie Ryan Walker with a nice 3.23 ERA. 13 starts. Alex Wood had 12 starts. Ross Stripling had 11. Manea had 10. Brebbia 10. Scott Alexander 8. Kyle Harrison 7. Keaton Wynn 5. Jacob Junis 4. And Tristan Beck, bringing up the rear, had 3 starts. So there's your 13 pitchers. We both said, like I said, we both said under. We were both wrong there. Mitch Haniger and Conforto, do they combine for 50.5 or more home runs or less than 50.5? We both went over. Again, we were so optimistic. If a lot of these things would have gone the way we wanted them to, this was a playoff team. Boy, were they under.
Did they get to 20?
They got to 21 because Conforto had 15 and Haniger had 6.
How many foul balls or swing and misses did Haniger have where his backswing ended up on one knee? That had to be more than the home runs that he hit in the season.
Oh, God, yeah, because he only hit 6, so he probably had 15 of those at least. And then the last one, wins over under at 90.5. I said over. I vividly remember predicting 94 wins. You said under. You were right on that one. I was wrong. We ended up with 79 wins on the season. I finished 1-5 in the predictions, and you finished a dead even 500, 3-3 on predictions. Did not go well. Of course, there will be. I'm going to put a lot of rookie predictions in there next season. We might up it to like 10 predictions in our preseason show as we get closer. I will try not to be fooled by the Bryce Johnsons of spring training this year.
I was talking to Jarrett, and we were talking about rookie first year rookie designation. And I think out of the rookies, Luis Matos for sure is not going to be a rookie next year. I think he had too many at-bats. I'm not sure about Casey Schmidt, but I think Luciano, I think Harrison, obviously Bailey is not going to be a rookie either. He had a lot of ABs, but I think Luciano and Harrison keep their rookie designation next year. And Jarrett said the reason why this is important is because if a player on your team wins rookie of the year, you get like some extra picks or something at the end of the first round. So he said there was a lot of, because we were basically talking about like, why do rookies or prospects come up to the big leagues way more than it feels like they used to, especially to sort of bounce back and forth. Like we're talking about tippity top prospects. And he said, well, what they're trying to do is they're trying to get their feet wet a little bit, but keep them underneath that rookie status because they want them to be ready when they are a rookie. They want them to play more. And if they get Rookie of the Year, then the team gets some bonus stuff, draft picks, X, Y, and Z. So they're trying to, even if they come up, they want to keep their rookie designation. But for Bailey and for Matos, for sure, I don't think they kept it. So Luciano and Harrison, probably half decent bets for Rookie of the Year next year for the Giants.
Yeah,
I think that'll be pretty interesting.
I'm looking at the rules. It's 130 at bats or 50 innings pitched. So under that, so it looks like, of course, Patrick Bailey, Casey Schmidt, Luis Matos are not going to be eligible next year, but everybody else who was a rookie who came up this year, Meckler, Luciano, Tyler Fitzgerald, yeah, all those guys. Those guys are all eligible next season. And then innings pitch, I'm taking a look, but I'm almost sure Harrison was under 50. Yeah, 34.2. So 34.2 innings pitched and 35 strikeouts. So a nice sparkling 9 Ks per 9.
Yeah, so that's going to be a theme for next year. Is you have two guys, one offense and one defense, one offense and one pitching, who will probably have a pretty good shot at least, early in the season to follow for that award.
Oh yeah, for sure.
All right, we are done here, and the Braves and the Phillies are still playing. The Braves took the lead in the bottom of the 8th, so they are the top of the 8th, and Minter is on the mound. Bryce Harper is at the plate. Philadelphia's last 3 outs here if they don't score for the Braves to get the come from behind victory. And if I remember correctly, Minter wasn't necessarily nails against the Giants, so I don't know how Braves fans feel about this right here, but he's been way off to Harper, and it's 3-1 count. So
yeah, and one last thing, I haven't even noticed the pitch clock in postseason baseball.
No,
it's there, but doesn't bother me. Haven't noticed it, and I know that was kind of a bone of contention going into the playoffs. Is that turn it off for the playoffs or make it longer, but. This game started at 3:07, and here we are in 3 hours and 3 minutes in. This would easily be a 4-hour game had it not been for the pitch clock. So,
and here comes Iglesias because Minter walked Harper on 5 pitches. So runner on first, no outs, and here comes your closer. All right, we are done here. Unfortunately, we didn't get to the end of the game, but those of you who are listening will know who won the game. But thank you for checking us out on YouTube. Thank you for listening for those on the BSPN audio feed. Brian and I will be back on Thursday. Rod and I will be back on Sunday afternoon after Niners and Browns. And probably have a couple of things at least one thing in the podcast feed in addition this week, not streaming on the YouTube channel, but I'm still thinking about some other interviews for the Double G show too on the side. So
how about can we do a thank you? Does this work if I do it? No, it's not going to work. The old iOS update, they got some new fun things in FaceTime and all that, but it doesn't work on here.
Yeah, it worked before we started the show. I think it got a little scared when Brad tried to do it. But yeah, so we'll be back next week. For Brad, I am Double G. See you when we see you. Peace out.
Peace.
Oh, that one worked.